The power goes out on a Tuesday. By Thursday, everything in your freezer is soft, and everything in your refrigerator smells wrong, and you carry $400 of meat out to the curb in a trash bag, and you stand there in the driveway feeling foolish. And here is the thing nobody says out loud. Your refrigerator is not preserving anything. It is postponing. Every piece of meat in there is rotting right now, this minute, only slowly, and the machine has to run forever and never fail, or the whole thing collapses in a weekend. You are paying a bill every month to hold a door shut against a problem you never actually solved. Now go to a village in Hunan or Sichuan in January and look up. Under the eaves, hanging from bamboo poles along the balconies, dark red slabs of pork, string after string of sausages, whole ducks pressed flat, hanging in the open air where anybody could touch them. No refrigeration, no power, sometimes no walls. And that meat will be perfectly good in July, and it will be better than it was in January, and it has been done this way for more than 2,000 years. My name is Shu Fen. In my family, the 12th month was when this happened, and the name of the food says so. The word for cured meat is the word for that month, because there was one right season, and everybody knew it, and for a few weeks every balcony and every courtyard in the neighborhood hung heavy with meat, and the whole street smelled of it. I am going to show you the whole thing, the one number that decides whether this works or fails, and it is a number you weigh rather than guess. The 3 conditions the air has to meet, and how to get all 3 in an American house in any month of the year. 4 different methods. From the simple one you can start this weekend to the one that keeps meat on a shelf with no cold at all. And the safety, plainly and completely, because this is the one subject on this channel where I will not let you improvise. But first, why meat rots? Because the whole method is nothing more than the answer to that. Meat does not rot on its own. Meat rots because things eat it. Bacteria mostly, and mold, and every one of them needs the same one thing, which is water. Not just water inside the meat, water they can actually reach and use. That is the whole idea, and it is the piece most people miss. It is not how much water is in the meat. It is how much of that water is free. And salt is the tool that takes it away, and it does it twice. First, it pulls. Put salt on the surface of a piece of pork, and water comes out of the meat to meet it, because water always moves toward the saltier side. Over days, a great deal of water leaves that meat and pools around it as brine. Then it binds. The salt that has moved into the meat grabs hold of the water that is left and holds it so tightly that a bacterium cannot pry it loose. The water is still in there. It is simply not available. The meat is a desert with a lake nobody can drink from. Then the wind finishes the job by taking away what remains on the surface, and once the outside is dry, nothing can get a foothold on it at all. Salt pulls, salt binds, wind dries. That is 2,000 years of Chinese meat preservation in 6 words. And now the reversal, and this is where most people go wrong before they have started. You think this is about the salt, so you focus on the salt, and you sprinkle it on generously by eye the way you would season a steak, and you hope for the best. It is not about the salt. It is about the ratio, and the ratio must be weighed. Here is the number. Salt at 3% of the weight of the meat, and 5% if you want to be safer and you do not mind it saltier. Weigh the pork, multiply by 0.03. That is your salt, in grams, on a kitchen scale that costs $12. Guess it by eye, and one of 2 things happens. Too little, and there is not enough salt to bind the water, and the meat spoils on the string while you watch it, and you have to throw the whole thing away. Too much, and it is inedible, and you have wasted good pork and a month of waiting. This is the opposite of most of what I teach you. On this one, precision is the method. Weigh it. Now the three conditions, because salt alone is only half. The air has to be right, and it has to be right in 3 ways at once. It has to be cold, under about 50 degrees, and 40 is better. This is why it was the 12th month and not the 6th. During the first days before the salt has fully penetrated, the meat is vulnerable, and cold is what holds the bacteria still long enough for the salt to win the race. It has to be dry. Wet air will not pull moisture out of anything, and worse, it lets mold settle. This is why the north and west of China cure, and the wet subtropical south smokes instead. And it has to move. Still air sits against the meat and goes damp and stays damp. Moving air carries the moisture away and keeps the surface drying. A breeze does more work here than another day of hanging. Cold, dry, moving. Get all 3, and this is nearly foolproof. Miss one, particularly the cold, and you are gambling with your family's stomach. Now, you probably do not have a Sichuan January outside your door. So, here is the modern answer, and it is honest and it works. Your refrigerator is a permanent winter, 35 to 40 degrees, and dry air because the machine is constantly pulling moisture out. That is 2 of the 3 conditions, running all year in a box you already own. And you can buy the 3rd for $15, which is a small clip-on fan on a shelf inside a spare fridge, or in the corner of your regular one if you have the room. So the whole tradition moves indoors. Cure in the fridge, dry in the fridge, and you can do in July in Florida what used to require January in the mountains. That is not cheating. That is the same 3 conditions, made by a different means. Now, the 4 methods. Method 1. Salt cure and wind dry, and this is the mother of all of them. Get pork belly, skin on in long strips 2 to 3 inches wide, or pork shoulder cut into similar strips. Belly is the classic, and the fat is what makes it good, so do not trim it lean. Weigh it. Salt at 3%, then the flavoring, and this is where a Chinese cure separates from a European one. Per 2 pounds of meat, roughly a tablespoon of Sichuan peppercorns, a couple of star anise, a small stick of cassia, and 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, and a spoonful of sugar if you like it rounder, which most southern recipes do. Toast the salt and the peppercorns together in a dry pan for 2 minutes until you can smell them. This matters more than it sounds because it wakes the spice up and dries the salt out. Rub it all over the meat, hard, into every surface, then into a bag or a covered dish, into the fridge, and turn it once a day. 3 to 5 days for thin strips, 7 for thick. Liquid will come out, that is the salt pulling, and it is exactly what you want, and you leave it in there with the meat. Then take it out, rinse the surface quickly, pat it very dry, and put a string through one end. Now hang it, cold, dry, moving air, for 1 to 3 weeks. On a balcony, if you live somewhere with a real winter, out of the rain and out of direct sun, and bring it in on a warm day. Or on a rack in the fridge with that little fan running. It is done when it has lost about 1/3 of its weight and it feels firm all the way through, like a hard rubber ball rather than a soft one, and the outside has gone deep red-brown and slightly translucent. Then it keeps. Months in a cool, dry place. Longer in the fridge, and a year in the freezer if you want to be certain. And here is the part that makes this so much safer than the European charcuterie you may have read about. You never eat this raw. Chinese cured pork is always cooked. You steam it for 20 minutes and slice it thin, or you slice it and stir-fry it with garlic scapes or leeks or dried chilies. It is not prosciutto, and it was never meant to be. That final cooking is a second line of defense that the Italian method does not have, and it is one of the reasons this tradition is so forgiving. Method 2. The soy sauce cure, and this one is easier and faster, and I would start a beginner here. Same pork, same strips. Instead of a dry salt rub, make a marinade. Roughly 2 parts light soy to 1 part dark soy, a good splash of shaoxing, a spoonful of sugar, star anise, cassia, peppercorns. Submerge the meat completely in a container in the fridge for 3 to 5 days, turning it daily. Then hang and dry exactly as before, 1 to 2 weeks. The soy is doing the same job as the dry salt because soy sauce is around 15% salt and it brings its own fermented depth with it. The result is darker, glossier, a little sweeter, and it is the version most people fall in love with first. This is what you often see hanging in Cantonese kitchens. Method 3. Smoke, which is a second layer laid on top of the first. In Hunan and Sichuan, where the winter air is cold but damp, salt and wind alone are not enough, so the meat is hung over a slow, smoldering fire, sometimes for weeks, often above the kitchen stove so it cures on the smoke of the family's own cooking. Smoke does 3 things at once. It dries the surface faster. It coats the meat in compounds that genuinely kill bacteria and stop fat going rancid. And it adds the flavor that makes Hunan bacon taste the way it does. The wood matters. Cypress and camphor are traditional, and so are tea leaves, sugarcane bark, and rice hulls. In an American backyard, a cheap offset smoker or a covered grill with the coals pushed to one side works. What you want is cold smoke, meaning under about 90 degrees, so the meat dries and takes on smoke without ever beginning to cook. A few hours a day for a few days, and the rest of the time it hangs in the cold. Method 4, and this is the one that needs no cold at all, which is why it existed everywhere before anybody had ice. Meat under fat. Cut pork shoulder into chunks. Salt it lightly a day in the fridge. Then cook it very slowly in its own rendered lard or in lard you buy at a low heat for 2 or 3 hours until it is completely tender and every bit of water has cooked out of it. Then pack the meat into a clean jar or a crock and pour the hot strained fat over the top until the meat is fully submerged and covered by a finger's depth of fat and let it set hard. That fat cap is an airtight seal. No air, no new bacteria, and the meat was sterilized by the long cooking. In a cool, dark cellar this kept for months, and this is why nearly every farming culture on earth arrived at some version of it. In China, the crock of meat under lard sat in the coolest corner of the house, and you dug out what you needed and smoothed the fat back over the top. The honest modern instruction is to keep the crock in the fridge because your house is warmer than a stone cellar in 1890, and then it holds for many months. Always smooth the fat back over any meat you expose. Any piece sticking up above the fat is a piece that will spoil. Now the safety, and I'm going to be completely plain because this is the one topic where I would rather bore you than lose you. First, weigh the salt, 3% minimum. This is not a place for a generous hand or a light one. Second, cold matters most in the first week. If your kitchen or your balcony is above 55 degrees, do not hang meat in it. Use the refrigerator. Curing in warm weather is how people get badly hurt, and it is why the tradition has a season attached to its name. Third, and this is the one thing you cannot substitute or reason your way around. If you are making sausage stuffed into a casing, you must use curing salt. It is sold as Prague Powder No. 1 or pink curing salt, and it is about $10 for a bag that will last you years. The reason is specific. Inside a stuffed sausage there is no oxygen, and the one bacterium that thrives with no oxygen is the one that makes botulism toxin, and it cannot be smelled or seen or tasted. Nitrite stops it. For a whole slab of belly hanging in moving air, the risk is far lower because air reaches every surface. But for anything stuffed or rolled or sealed, it is not optional. Use 1 teaspoon per 5 pounds of meat. Exactly. And never more. And keep the bag well away from children because it is dyed pink, precisely, so nobody mistakes it for table salt. Fourth, know what to throw away. A little white powdery bloom on the outside of a hanging piece is normal and can be wiped off with a cloth dipped in vinegar. Slimy, sticky, or a sour or ammonia smell means throw it out. Fuzzy black or green mold means throw it out. Do not cut the bad part off and keep the rest, not with meat, and do not talk yourself into it because of the work you have put in. Pork belly costs $15. Your week does not. And fifth, cook it. This is not a raw product. Steam it, stir-fry it, put it in rice. That last heat is your final protection, and it is also how the food is meant to be eaten. The mistakes that ruin this are few, and everyone is avoidable. Guessing the salt instead of weighing it. Hanging meat in warm weather, hanging it in still air in a closed cupboard, rain or direct sun on it. Trimming all the fat off because the fat is the flavor and it protects the meat. Skipping curing salt in sausage. Cutting into it too early before it has lost a third of its weight. And giving up on day 4 because it does not look like the picture yet when it needs 2 more weeks. Now let me say the plain thing about the machine in your kitchen. Refrigeration is barely 100 years old in ordinary homes. For every century before that, everybody on Earth had to solve this problem. And they all solved it. And the solutions were salt and smoke and fat and air. Then the machine arrived and it was easy. And within 2 generations, almost everybody forgot how. And now an entire population genuinely believes that meat cannot be kept without electricity. And look at what that dependence costs you. A machine running every hour of every day for its whole life. A power bill for it every month forever. $400 gone in a blackout. Freezer burn on everything you kept too long, because a freezer does not stop time either. And a market that sells you a $200 dry aging refrigerator and a $50 curing kit with a plastic tray in it. To do the thing a bag of salt and a piece of string did for 2,000 years. I do not think there is a wicked man in a back room. It is duller and sadder than that. There is money in an appliance and in the power that runs it and in the one that replaces it in 12 years. There is no money at all in a bag of salt, a few star anise, and a hook under the eaves. Nobody films a commercial for a piece of string. No salesman knocks on your door to tell you that the pork belly on sale this week could be hanging in your kitchen and still be food in 6 months. So here is what I would have you do. Buy 1 piece of pork belly, 2 pounds, skin on. Buy a $12 kitchen scale, if you do not have one, because you will use it for the rest of your life. Weigh the meat. Salt at 3%. Toast the salt with a spoonful of Sichuan peppercorns. Add a couple of star anise and a splash of Shaoxing and rub it in hard. 5 days in the fridge, turned once a day. Then rinse, dry, string it, and hang it. On the balcony if it is winter where you are, or on a rack in the fridge with a small fan blowing over it if it is not. Then leave it alone for 2 weeks, and do not cut into it early, and do not panic when it looks strange on day 3, because it is supposed to. And when it has gone hard and dark and lost a third of its weight, steam a piece for 20 minutes, slice it thin, and fry it with garlic and a handful of greens. That is when you will understand why an entire country spent every December doing this. Tell me in the comments what the winter is like where you live, whether you have the cold, dry air to hang meat outside or whether you will be doing it in the refrigerator, because that changes everything and it is different in every state. And tell me if there is a cured meat from your own family or your own country, because almost every family on earth has one somewhere back a few generations, and I want to hear what yours was. The stories you leave will teach the next person far more than I ever could. and I read every single one. Next time, since we are on meat that gets better with time, I am going to show you the pot my grandmother never once emptied. A dark spiced liquid that meat goes into and comes out of, that is strained and topped up and used again for years and for decades, and in some families for more than 100 years, so that a jar of it is given to a daughter when she marries. It costs almost nothing to begin. You can start yours on a Sunday afternoon, and it will outlive you. That one is next.